Napa River Inn, joined by American architect and co-founder of Marmol Radziner Design Build Practice in Los Angeles, where we are following up after his presentation, Preservation as Innovation. So can you tell us, what are we getting wrong when we're treating preservation as something static?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. I think that we are trying to discuss the idea that preservation needs to expand its perspective to understand the impacts of things like climate change and the national housing crisis. We need to loosen some of our perspective and allow more adaptability and change within the historic context.
In one sentence, what should we preserve and why now?
Wow. In one sentence, I would say we should preserve the cultural monuments that define where we've come from and fight to allow those structures to adapt. So I'm not suggesting by preserve them, that means freeze them in time. I'm saying invest appropriately to protect them and change them in such a way that they remain useful and viable to the community.
In places that are facing climate issues or scarce housing, preservation can be seen as an obstacle. So how can we rethink preservation so that it's not being treated as preservation versus housing?
It's a great question. I think fundamentally we need to prioritize historic buildings, and there are some that are truly important to a community. There are others that we may need to let go of and allow the community to change and grow. And so it's a balance, and we have to talk and think hard about what are the true priorities within the community.
I imagine that to be very difficult, to say the least, and everyone has their opinions. So how does a society come together in order to make those decisions?
I think all good questions are hard to grapple with. And so this is a hard question. How do we really understand and put into practice a response to the housing crisis while still respecting and preserving the structures that define who we are, that help us understand where we came from and how we define culture in today's context?
And you've actually said that preserving a building is a sustainable act in and of itself.
We know that the most sustainable approach to development is to reuse existing buildings, historic or non-historic. So reuse is inherently sustainable. So if we can reuse more buildings, we're overall using less energy to produce functional space. And so we would argue that preservation is an act of sustainability, but we have to remain flexible and open to change.
And how is maybe some of those projects an example of that, in order to incorporate something that is historical or of significance because of standing the test of time, and then developing it in a way that also creates something new, like the mixed-use buildings mentioned?
I think that in the context of climate change, we're seeing a greater impact of natural disaster. So I think it behooves us to harden our historic buildings. So we may need to think about adding additional insulation to modern structures. We need to look at vents. We need to look at window systems, maybe go to dual pane glazing systems where they were originally historically single glazed. I think we need to think about how we protect our buildings. Earthquakes, for example, we're going to have to intrude into original historic fabric to strengthen our buildings, to make them more resilient to the next earthquake. Hurricanes, same thing. We're seeing in Gulf regions terrible impacts from hurricanes. And so there are things that we can responsibly do to historic structures to make them more resilient.
You've cautioned against what you call procedural nostalgia. So how do you then shift that from preserving a physical artifact to really the cultural meaning of a space?
Yeah, I think that We have to recognize that structures do have cultural meaning, and they do play a part in defining a sense of place and give communities a greater sense of meaning. So I am a preservationist. I do believe it's important to hold on to artifacts from the past. All I'm suggesting is we need to create a political climate and a construction climate that allows us to adapt those buildings to changing needs. And so we need to have hard conversations about these issues.
So then what have you learned in working with restoring architects when it comes to trying to make that balance between historical integrity and contemporary needs?
That is the process of decision making in a historical context. I mean, you are balancing issues that impact your decisions. There's issues of cost, there's issues of time, there's issues of available technology, there's issues of skill within the community to do certain types of work. So there are many factors that impact how we change buildings. And I think that we have to be supportive of the difficulty of that process. None of this is easy. I'm not suggesting these are casual conversations. These are hard conversations. These are issues that should be discussed within the public arena. It's just the public arena needs to lose some of its critical, judgmental perspective toward developers or homeowners that are simply trying to create opportunities for people to live and work that's efficient and affordable.
Is there an example that comes to mind of a project or a city or a place that's getting it right?
Oh, I think there are many projects. We were involved in the Century Plaza Hotel in Los Angeles. The developer initially wanted to tear down the building. That was not a good outcome. So we had the opportunity to work with that developer to look at options to losing the historic building. And in order to preserve their program and get all the program they needed to make it economically viable, because you have to do that, we were also able to adapt the building in such a way that we were able to save it. So we converted a hotel that was over 700 keys down to a smaller, more boutique hotel and greatly reduced the number of keys. In trade-off, we created condominiums in the upper floor. So we changed the hotel function, we changed the internal dynamics of the building in order to preserve it. If we hadn't made changes, the developer would have had to tear the structure down. So the building exists, it's still there with some accommodation.
And so after this discussion here at Napa today, I know that there was a question that came from a homeowner here in Napa of a very old building, to say the least. So what is it like when approaching a steward of a home and the challenges that they have because of how expensive it is in order to preserve the place in which they live, but then balancing the responsibility they might have to the community like Napa? What were your thoughts when you heard that question about this town?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and Napa is not alone in this struggle. The issue of construction cost is a struggle nationwide, and every jurisdiction, every city, every county has their own political morass, and they have their own jurisdictional kind of complexity. We have become too complex. It is too difficult to make decisions and move projects forward. We have created a politic around building that allows too many people to have a voice, and therefore we cannot move forward effectively. Things take too long, and that's adding to the lack of affordability of our buildings. So we have to find ways to simplify and streamline approval processes. We have to let go of some of our obsessive compulsive need to control and allow people to make decisions and move forward with their projects. It's not in the public interest to stop and delay projects unnecessarily.
If you could change one policy in order to better align community needs with preservation, what would it be?
I would say CEQA. I would strip CEQA of its power. CEQA is being misused today by preservationists, by environmentalists, to stop projects that should be moving forward. CEQA is no longer about environmental protection, which was its original mandate for public buildings. It's now being applied to private structures and private development and used not as a way to make things more environmentally responsive, but instead to simply stop projects because communities see change as negative. And when communities see change as negative, they are hurting their own future. So I would strip CEQA of much of its power.
For architects and planners, what is one mindset shift that is most urgent in order to have preservation stay relevant?
Keep the conversation positive and supportive. Educate and help people understand why we believe preservation is a responsible way of addressing historic buildings and that we can both save and preserve history and integrate new uses, accommodate new perspectives on living styles. I would say we just need to be more supportive and embrace different perspectives.
And before I let you go, one fun question. What is, in your opinion, one building that is a must-see when visiting either LA or the Bay?
Oh, that's interesting. In Los Angeles, I would say you have to get to Schindler's King's Roadhouse. 1920s, Schindler, it was so progressive, and it was designed for two families. So it's a wonderful social experiment. Tilt-up concrete, experimental construction. There were no bedrooms. There were sleeping pods on the roof. It was just such a progressive mindset, and it's beautiful architecturally. It's now a public resource. It's run by the Mack Center, so you can have access. It's not a private home. And because it's not a private home, it's okay that it leaks and it doesn't really function very well, and the doors don't really lock or slide. The public arena allows the house to be more historically original, which you could not do if someone were actually living in the home and wanting to watch the Super Bowl on a big TV.
Well, this has been very interesting, to say the least. I really appreciate you coming out and being here and speaking with us. Leo Marmol, an architect, and just really happy to meet you. Thank you for joining us here in Napa.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.